Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the History Geeks. Hi, Jane. It's awesome to see you again. How are you?
Hi, Andrew. Awesome to see you too. I'm fantastic. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Very well. Been looking forward to this one for a while because we decided, for those of you who've been following us right from the beginning, we seem to be developing a type. We obviously really love our 90s classics, and so after a bit of consultation, didn't we decide we'd try and break out of that mold a tiny bit just to
And
do
and
some.
we just have with this one.
Yes, by was it 2 years? 2002 this film came out, and something completely off our usual diet. So technically historical, or should I say prehistorical.
Uh-huh.
Um, and our first animated film. So we are looking at, I won't do a drum roll because I'll knock my laptop off, but Ice Age.
Yes,
So
indeed. And
yeah.
a lovely, fun little animated film. And I think it brought back so many happy memories when we were rewatching it. I know it did
Yeah.
you as well, Andrew.
Absolutely. I'd forgotten what a really, really charming feel-good film Ice Age was, because you just and it's very early in that period of animated adventures becoming, really popular. And it's one that sticks in my memory because it was just such a lovely, lovely story. Excellent characters. You get into the emotion. You the characters I thought were really well scripted, especially when you consider there's only, I mean, really, ultimately, there's only three with what you'd call
Yeah,
speaking parts.
yeah,
And a storyline that's quite straightforward, isn't it? Because
yeah.
am I right in thinking you could really boil it down to kid gets separated from parents, band of well-meaning strangers who don't particularly like each other at first get together to help kid, and the experience bonds them. Kid is reunited with family, everything's lovely. Very basic story, but very beautifully treated in this film.
Absolutely. And you also have the great theme. This is always good in any kind of movie of those three outcasts, which they kind of are, the three of them, in the herd that they create for themselves. And a very unlikely herd it is. But it is a lovely theme, this, that, you have these individuals that are somehow on the edge of life and not really part of their own family anymore. And then they get together and find each other and find themselves with this human child, and they don't really know what to do with it.
Yes, yeah, it's a great crash course in overcoming difference, isn't it? When there are some people who say if you've got two difficult people on your team, you should get them to work together because that's the best way to build the camaraderie, and it certainly works in this story. So now this is correct me if I get the names mixed up, Jane, because I always do this. So we've got Manny, who's the woolly mammoth.
Yep.
We've got Sid the sloth and Diego the saber-toothed tiger. And
That is true. That is true. And I'm actually going to set the scene a little bit, Andrew, because if we are going to be geeky a little bit, we find ourselves. Hi, Oscar, by the way.
yes, I brought my own saber-toothed tiger to
Oh,
say
yes,
hello
that's
to everyone else.
fine specimen there. Oh, he's not interested. Okay, fair enough.
No, no, he knows I'm paying attention to him now, so he's just flatlining on me.
Like any saber-toothed cat would. So we find ourselves in an interesting period of time because this is within what is known geologically as the Pleistocene epoch. I really hope I'm pronouncing these names correctly, guys, because it's hard enough in my own language. So just correct me if I get it wrong in the comments. But this was a time period before the one we are in right now, which is geologically the Holocene. But the Pleistocene was a very, very long period of time spanning from around 2.56 million years ago and up until around 12,000 years ago. And of course, we have sub periods within that very, very great time span. And just to also make it clear, an ice age effectively, because it is a little bit of a misleading term, but an ice age it is a period of time where the temperature on the surface of the on the planet and in the atmosphere is cooling. So it's getting cooler. We're not necessarily covered with ice as the term might suggest. I love that little discussion they have, by the way, in the migration, where they go, why is it not called the nippy age? Or
Oh, yes.
because of all the ice. But good question, actually. But it is a period of time where the temperature is falling, so opposite what we're experiencing now. And of course, it doesn't happen like from one year to another. This is a slow cooling of temperature. And the specific period we are in this movie is actually within the Pleistocene epoch. We have several glacial periods. And the last great one we had happened about 20,000 years ago. And it's also known as the last glacial maximum. And it was a time when large ice sheets covered very large part of the land masses. So large parts of North America, Europe, Asia were covered in ice sheets. And of course, they shaped, as we know, they shaped the landscape, they shaped the fjords, the drumlins, and all of that in our landscapes today. Effectively, this lasted up until around 11,500 to 12,000 years ago, which is when the Pleistocene period or epoch ended. So this is the time where we enter this film, around 20,000 years ago. And as you said, Andrew, what happens basically when environments or climates start to change is that you have a change in circumstances. And one of the effects this might have is migration, because you have to survive. And if the food that you normally eat is not around anymore because it might have migrated because of the climate, you have to move with the food. If there is no shelter, if there is no security for you or your herd, you have to move. So migration was a sort of natural consequence of temperature changes or climate changes, a bit like we see it today. There are certain parts of the world that becomes harder and harder to live in because of flooding and so on, or because of temperatures just being too hot and all of that happening. So migration was not an unusual thing, and you moved with the food, you moved for safety, you moved for security and for shelter. And we do have some really interesting creatures around us at this time. And because the animals have such a great focus in this story, I think let's start with the animals, because I think all of us know the mammoth as kind of, the most well-known, the most popular, huge creature. Part of the mastodons were a little bit of a different creature, but they are related to modern day elephants. They were larger, they were more fur, they had these curved teeth, and they were ideally suited for cool environments overall. We also have, you mentioned them, Andrew, the saber-toothed cats.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Larger cat-like feline animals with these huge saber teeth.
Almost impractical looking, aren't they? Because they're a bit too, I'm not entirely sure what you do with those.
They are very good for hunting, but, they are a bit in the way, I would imagine, sometimes. And another really great, we see them a little bit as well in the film, are the glyptodons, those huge armored mammals, a bit related to armadillons. They have a shield, sort of tortoise-like.
Oh, yes, you see them in the first few minutes of the film, don't you? One of them's thinking he might evolve the capability to fly, and you see him in the background leaping off the cliff. Yeah.
He's on the edge of evolution. Yeah, didn't quite see out yet. And then you have, the sloth is an interesting one, because they were known as, I'm guessing now, because obviously the animals in the film is a bit sometimes artistic freedom and caricaturish, but they're built on animals. There was something called a ground sloth, which were giant sloths, and I think Sid is based on that creature. They were actually more bear-like. If we look at them today, they were larger than today's sloths, but I think he's probably based on those. We don't know, of course, if they were. Sloths are known for being sort of very slow in movement and in all of that going on. We don't really know if they were, but they were larger animals nonetheless. We also have, I think we see them, the dire wolves.
Yes.
Larger
Yes.
wolves than today, hunting in packs, predators as well, more robust than today's wolves. And then, oh yeah, we have humans. This is interesting. Humans, the only species who can't talk, apparently.
Oh yes, indeed. Yes, I really loved that wrinkle
Yeah.
because it changes things so much when the animals are the articulate ones and the species that we're so used to being the communicative ones are just
Yes.
kind of dumb. And go, mm.
I
Oh,
love
yeah.
that bit. That is brilliant. That was a genius piece of directing and idea making, that one. But humans are interesting in this one. Actually, this is probably the most interesting periods for humans because there are several human species around.
Oh, okay.
In this period, very, very long period of time that the Pleistocene epoch was, we have the Homo erectus
Mm.
for large bits of the times. They existed from around 1.6 million years ago and up until, oh, I need to be careful now, 250,000 years ago-ish. So part of the Homo family. And then, of course, we have the Homo neanderthalensis, so the Neanderthals, as we know them. We have the first fossils of Neanderthals existing from around 430,000 years ago, but I think the best archaeological findings we have from around 130,000 years ago, and then up until they disappeared around 40,000 years ago. But they existed, of course, next to our ancestors, the Homo sapiens. We, of course, being the Homo sapiens sapiens, I point at myself as if, this is a specimen, this is a species.
Yeah. Well, yes, it's
there we go, that's enough. But the Homo sapiens sapiens, which is us, is a subcat. If you look at the grand family tree of humans, it's a subcategory of Homo sapiens. So we are a subcategory of the Homo sapiens. Now, for a long time, it was actually believed that the Neanderthals were also a subcategory of Homo sapiens. They were actually known, even in literature, when I studied, some literature still described them as Homo sapiens neanderthalensis. Nowadays, we believe they are not a subcategory of the Homo sapiens, but part of the Homo family. But I can kind of see the mistake because we share more than 99% of our DNA with the Neanderthals. And there were interbreeding. So a Neanderthal and a Homo sapiens could have an offspring. And today we actually have about 2% of our DNA still coming directly from the Neanderthals, maybe the clever bit.
okay. Well, that because I know absolutely nothing about the really quite fascinating period because to someone coming in from the outside like me, I mean, for most lay people, all of us wandering around the planet today are pretty much garden variety Homo sapiens. So do we know what became of all our sort of, I'll call them our cousin species, or is it a very complex picture?
It's a very, very complex picture because, of course, we are talking about things that go so far back that the archaeological findings we have are scarce. And we have to be careful how we interpret them because a lot of things have happened. But the truth is, I think the question of what happened to the Neanderthals is still puzzling us because we don't know. What we do know is that for whatever reason, the smaller species, meaning the Homo sapiens, survived. The Neanderthals were not taller than, the Homo sapiens were taller, but they were smaller in skeleton and in robustness. The Neanderthals were bigger than us. They were more solid. They were more robust in the skeletons. We know them with these big foreheads, for example.
Oh, the ridges like you see in the characters in the story. Yes.
So in a way, they were more suitable for this environment and for hunting and for withstanding the cold and so on. Now, the Homo sapiens developed one thing that seemed to have been our main cause of survival, which is an immense sense of innovation. We took advantage of tool making. Nowadays, we would say technology. And we don't need we grow taller and taller, but we don't grow more robust or physically stronger. And the reason for that being we don't need to. We rely
Mm.
entirely on our sense of innovation. So I can live, although I'm not certainly not the most physical human being, I can live in a cold environment because of the shelter I have called a house with central heating. I can also live in a warm environment because of air conditioning. I don't have to go and hunt my own mammoth. I can go down the supermarket. So effectively, we rely less and less on our physical strength and more on our ability to innovate, which is, I suppose, there are pros and cons because we seem to have innovated ourselves into our own destruction as well to a certain degree as we start to impact our surroundings in a not so positive way. But it also means we have the ability to innovate ourselves out of any problems. But effectively, what happened was that we are now, the Homo sapiens sapiens, the only human species on the planet, and therefore also the only, because we are the dominating race, our only real enemy is us. We are our own worst enemy, so to speak, and we do a lot of damage to one another, I have to say. But back then, of course, we had lots of natural enemies. I mean, you were, and I love this concept in the movie as well. If you're not part of a herd, you are dead. You cannot survive on your own, no matter what creature you are. You need your herd. There is
Yes.
no surviving on your own. Not even for a huge mammoth. You can be attacked by a pack of dire wolves or saber-toothed cats. There's no such thing as surviving on your own. So I love that the movie took up this theme so massively of the herd and just how important that was.
Yes, it's very much a core theme, isn't it? And you
Yeah.
you make that lovely arc from Sid commenting halfway through the film that this has got to be this is the weirdest herd that he's ever seen. To Diego accepting the notion
Yeah.
right at the end and going, we're a herd, we look out for each
Yeah.
other. And yeah,
I
yeah.
love that they put in these life-changing moments where they save each other's lives to sort of manifest that, we are together, we look after each other.
Yes. And it's curious because it when I first watched the film all those years ago, I thought that it was imprinting a very human idea upon animals, which in a sense it is. But a lot of us, I think, certainly I didn't in the early 2000s, realize just how community oriented some animals are. And that really sad bit where Manny is looking at the cave painting, and there's that very strong hint that he lost his family to human hunters. I was more than a hint, really.
Yeah.
Um, and more recent studies, I think, of elephants in Africa, where they seem to have I don't know whether you can legitimately call them rituals, but some have been observed forming a semicircle around the bones of one of their own species, almost like they're holding a vigil. And you know, this habit of theirs of going to certain places to die or returning to. So there's clearly a lot going on behind the eyes that we
Yeah.
can't really understand because, well, we can't ask them, which is
No,
because
no.
we don't talk. That's the trouble. But we're building this slow appreciation that actually they're certainly within the same species of a lot of species. There's this lovely sense of community. Now, whether they can get it across species, I don't know. I've heard of dogs and cats coexisting in happy families, but
But I think maybe we have also, because you say we communicate, but or we can't communicate, but maybe in our massively fast-paced development, we've also maybe lost our sense a little bit for communicating with other animals, because we know that many animals, and elephants, as you say, are hugely social animals.
mm,
And they communicate on a very great. We know dolphins does as well, or do as well. And a lot of animals who live in herds or flocks have that capability. And I don't think we understand half of what is actually going on socially
no,
from time to
no.
time. So it is fascinating that it really is.
Yeah, well, I look forward to the day when we can decipher whale song because that's quite fascinating. But
Really is.
um, Yeah, if only so they can save us from weird alien spaceships. But I only insert that Star Trek reference because I love the fact that there was a very very guarded one in
It was
when the human child does the whole live long and prosper thing as they go past the spaceship.
that was so great. That was so great. Oh, it was so cleverly done, that one. It was so clever. And I think also having Sid with this little lisp that he has,
Oh yes.
and him being, the sort of obvious clown and funny one, you're with us now. Dignity's got nothing to do with it. It's a fantastic character. And then you have the more sort of grumpy Jago, who obviously is there on a mission.
Hmm.
And a dark one, yes.
Yes, I like Diego's journey. I like how he changes and develops as a
Yeah,
character, and that very because of course the pace of the film is actually quite quick. You won't get bored watching this one because stuff just keep whether it's a bonding session or something they've got to get around to get where they're going. He's very soon forced into that corner where he's got to decide where his loyalties lie, but he does have quite a dry sense of humor too, and I like that about him. He's got in fact, actually, him and Manny have a very different kind of
yeah.
sarcasm, which plays off each other quite well.
It actually does. I think their dynamic is interesting to watch as well, because they're obviously the two clever ones. And also Diego knows that he is not on his own physically strong enough to take on Manny. So he kind of has to at least stay good friends with him at the beginning. And then that relationship with the child starts to form, and he doesn't really want to have anything to do with that child. But as you mentioned also, Andrew, that very poignant scene in the grotto where we get to know what happened to his family, and the hunt there, and we get the sense that he lost his family to human hunters. I love that, it's the child that brings him out of that little daydream, as well, that, there's because there is something heartbreaking as well about, we all got to live. The humans got to live as
Mm,
well, and they hunt the mammoths, and it's all sort of part of that wide circle of life. But of course, behind all of that, there are losses, and there are
yeah.
animals and humans suffering.
Yeah, and Manny's reaction, which I find quite powerful, is that it's pure sorrow. There's not so
Yeah,
with the pack of saber-toothed tigers, it's all about their leaders, so it's all about vengeance
yeah,
and which sadly is also quite a human trait, but yeah, it seems to fit the saber-toothed. But when you get Manny, who very much comes across as a gentle giant
yeah,
underneath his prickly
yeah.
exterior, there's just that sadness until, and it actually is quite affecting, I find, until that moment when he's, as you say, brought back to reality. And
Yeah. He's drawn really well, because he can be sort of with that, huge forehead, sort of very, very
yeah,
grumpy and fierce. And at the same time, his eyes, when they, well up, it's beautifully done in the animation, those emotions.
they all have wonderful eyes. They're
Yeah.
really, really expressive. I mean, even Sid from time to time, when he sort of returns from outer space and you can see him trying to think about something. Yeah, I'm actually really glad that the Sid we see in the film is the Sid we got, because I understand they went through a few character iterations with
I
him.
think they did. Yeah.
Yeah, was there not a first version of Sid that was supposed to be a tiny bit closer to Diego, where he's a bit conniving, bit of a
Yeah.
con man type,
I
bit of a
think
ladies' man as well? I mean, apparently that mud tub scene with him and the other two sloths was apparently part of a larger one, but they
yeah.
decided to tone it down to keep
I
it kid friendly.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right. But I think he's a difficult character to nail, because first of all, what does he look like? Do you make him like a sloth was back then, which is more bear-like, or do you make him like a sloth nowadays, so that we recognize what he is right away? And we kind of do, because he's hanging there from a tree in a very
Yeah.
awkward position when we first see him. So we kind of know what he is, but at the same time, you can't. I know they talked about as well, do we make him slow? Because we can't really do that. No one is going to want to listen to that throughout an entire movie. Uh,
No.
so what does he look like? What does he sound like? And then also, as you say, what actually is his character? Is he like the funny one? I like that he's the one surviving on like pure coincidence and sometimes just this larger than life sort of slightly silly personality that he doesn't really know when or how he's surviving. It just happens.
Yes, yeah, it's funny. It's got there's a constantly circular process inside him, I think, where his attitude to life is fueled by his boundless optimism. And as you say, the fact that the universe goes, oh, all right, you can live another day, and that it fuels back into that optimism. It's like, oh, well, clearly I'm on the right track here. And I think he's genuinely bewildered about why other creatures find him either mildly annoying or even want to kill him after a while. I mean, the whole thing with the two, what are they? The prehistoric rhinos? Is it Brontotheres or
Oh
something?
yes, 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 yes.
Yeah,
With
the whole thing with the
the
dandelion.
dandelion.
It's beautiful. It's like, oh, it's the last dandelion of the season. And then he just rocks up and stomps in it all. It's like, oh, hey.
Oh, and you just take to him immediately. You just love him immediately, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And actually in a way, I think he is very much the group that the glue that holds the
Yeah,
group together.
yeah,
Because the one thing I think initially that gives Diego and Manny a common cause
yeah,
is that they just don't know what to do with this idiot.
yeah.
And
Yes, true. That is true. And also in a way they kind of need him because someone needs to take care of the child. And
yes.
they don't really know because Diego obviously doesn't want to, and Manny doesn't really know how to, how does this work? What do I do with this?
No, no, neither of them have the right limbs. And also, I quite like how Manny puts it when Sid's complaining about having to, I guess, change a dirty nappy. It's like, it's because you're small and because you're insignificant. The realities of life in this era, and it's called the food chain.
Humans are disgusting.
Yeah.
No, it's very well done. It's really well done. And also, of course, and this is always a good theme, that thing about loyalty, you know, that we see towards the end. Where does Diego's loyalty go in this, you know, because he kind of fulfills his mission and brings them to the right place, but then of course, obviously, has a change of heart.
Yes, he's very much a demonstration of that old maxim that you can choose your friends, but you can't choose. I was going to say your family, but I suppose in this case your pack might be more appropriate. And
Yes,
yeah,
true, true.
because the members of his pack really are not the most appealing personalities out there. I'm
No,
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 suited for saber-toothed tigers, but
absolutely.
not great.
Oh, and Andrew, as we talked about, there is one creature that none of us can identify. We don't know what he is, but he pops up and he's very sweet and lovely.
Oh, yes. Would this be the one whose actions move entire continents and
Uh-huh,
trigger?
uh-huh.
Yes. Yeah. So this is little Scrat with his acorn, isn't it? Yes.
And as Andrew said before we started recording, what is he? Is he a squirrel? Is he a rat? What is he?
So a thing.
Well, I think Scrat, the name, as you said, Andrew, isn't it a mix of the two?
Yeah, so there was a story, and again, guys, all of you, if you guys know more, do comment. But I saw this on Wikipedia while I was just reminding myself when Ice Age actually came out because it had been a while. Apparently, Scrat is an amalgamation of squirrel and rat, which I can sort of see when you look at him. There's the whole furtive kind of thing going on, and the manic energy as well that
Yes.
you'd associate with both those species.
Yes. That's true. That's true. And the determination, just do it's mine. I'm going to hold on to this
Oh,
thing.
yeah, he's unstoppable. I mean, it's like
And
that.
I loved how, as I was saying, I loved how I cannot remember the name of the actor who voiced him, but I loved how his entire script was just, you know, moaning and whining and screaming. And so two moans, three whines, and it was just in, oh,
Yeah, no, he deserves an Oscar all on his own. Just because that's a really tricky thing to do. Yeah, he was supposed to have been a very bit part character, but apparently during test screenings, he was so popular with
Yeah.
children that they decided to expand his role. Including, I love the fact that he does this. He bookends the entire story, so he's there at the beginning, triggering an ice age,
Yeah.
and he's there right at the very end. Now, I missed this the first time I watched the film because, like a lot of impatient people, I got up while the credits were still rolling. But there's that final scene where 20,000 years later he washes up on a beach somewhere and then triggers a volcanic eruption.
Oh, he is lovely. I love that they kept him in. And also, I kind of love in a way that he's kept entirely outside our main story and our main characters. He sort of operates entirely on his own.
Yeah, yeah. His whole universe is just the acorn, isn't it? Everything that happens around him is completely incidental.
I love that. I love that. And in a way, also maybe a very telling story in itself, because you kind of, all you can do really is to look after your own world as everything else changes around you. You can't really do anything else.
No, no, you can't. And he does just get on with it, doesn't he? And like Sid, he does all right. You know, he goes through some really hair-raising situations, but he's fine at the end of it. Still has his acorn.
Still got something to. And then I love when he finally has it, he's trying to bury it somewhere and to hide it somewhere, and he can't because there's ice all over the place. So he's just squeezing and jumping on it and trying to. So, oh, bless him. We all feel for him. But no,
Yes, poor
he's
Scrap.
delightful. But I also like, on a more serious note, Andrew, that the movie doesn't turn away from the seriousness of this age, because we do have some deaths as well. Like the mother of the little human child is washed
Yeah.
away. And the entire hunting element, which was all about surviving, you know. And I do like that they are not shying away from that, that this is obviously we don't sort of see it, but that it's not hidden, that it's not all, you know, oh, and they lived happily ever after, that there is, you know, that element of just how tough this life was for everyone.
Yes, yeah, and I imagine it must have been a really brutal environment because it's nature red in tooth and
Yeah.
claw, isn't it? You've got to do certain things to survive, and for humans particularly because we're a funny species, aren't we? You're quite right, touching on what you said earlier. Thanks to our innovation, we're not. I think this has been said by a few people before, but we're not ideally suited to survive in any one environment, but we can adapt to survive in any environment. But that does sometimes involve wearing the creatures we kill as well as eating them, which I'm not too sure how they take that really, as much as animals think this over, because they'll kill and eat each other,
Yeah.
but we sort of cut up the skins to make tents and things. And I'm
Incredibly good.
beginning to see why the saber-tooth's sort of really quite angry. You know, it's not enough that you eat us, you sort of parade around, you know, wearing my uncle around your shoulders.
So true. That's an incredibly good point, because we never really were suited to just one environment or one place on earth to live. We were, and maybe that's why we've done so well. We were adaptable, and we
Mm,
adapted really fast and really well, thanks to our sense of innovation and also our sense of, obviously, we are not the only animal who use tools.
mm.
I mean, the monkeys still do this today, and other animals do as well. And we're certainly not the only animal who take advantage of herds and social skills and the fact that we can hunt in a flock or protect each other in a flock. Certainly not. But we have been incredibly good at adapting. And probably that's going to be what keeps us alive for a very long time, that we despite the mess we make ourselves, but also despite whatever nature comes up with, we are very adaptable in many ways.
Yes, and it's not pushed very much, but there's that great hint, I think, in the cave painting, and also in the symbols on the father's cloak that,
Yeah,
we have developed picture forms of communication, and we're on the cusp of that amazing ability to pass on and build on knowledge to the next generation in that visual or written form. Um, because I suppose if you're a non-literate creature, you can show your offspring how to do things like chimps and monkeys do with basic tools. But you always run up against this brick wall of you innovate to a degree, but your lifespan isn't long enough, and you can't pass it on effectively enough for the next generation to then innovate. Whereas we can write stuff down and record it or draw a picture of it. So you get, I don't know, maybe a third generation Neanderthal looking at a picture and going, okay, so granddad did that, and then dad did that, and they both found it didn't work. So I'm going to do it this way. Oh, look, it works even better now. And so we progress from there, don't we?
that's true.
As you say, till we arrive at heated homes and global domination.
But that's a brilliant way of putting it, because effectively that is what's happening, and that is what happened. You start with someone made fire, and we got warm at night, and someone found a way of taking advantage of animal skin, and that kept you warm as well, and all of that happening and passed on from generation to generation. And there is still something heartwarming in cultures where they hold on to those old methods of tool making, of living with nature, and passing on that knowledge,
Mm.
that has transformed from generation to generation. And humans have that. Yes, we have that skill, and that's probably what has made us so dominant.
Yes, and we can look backwards as well, because you're quite right. Even in the societies where we sort of, as you said, advanced ourselves out of the need to be able to do all these things, we still have a relatively good record of how we used to do it. So hopefully, if we ever have to, we could revert to
That
because I know there's plenty of living history people out there who have got loads of traditional skills, and I watched a terrifyingly impressive YouTube video 2 weeks ago of a man who just built a log cabin by himself, spent 2 years out in the woods doing it, but knew all the traditional. He was using modern tools, but he was building it traditional methodology. And I just felt a slight sense of comfort that we've got a few people who still remember
yeah.
how to do that.
That is true. That is true. It is amazing. And I think we do lose skills because we have, tools to do a lot for us. Uh,
Mm,
and that also impact us biologically and physically, because we simply don't have a need for being particularly physical strong anymore. We've grown taller than most of
mm,
our other human species that have existed, but we haven't in any way grown bigger. We are in a way less robust now, size-wise, in bone structure and so on, than we used to be. Of course, if we go back far enough, like if we go back like to the Homo naledi and so on, we are smaller. But it's interesting how we have developed physically as well, because we don't really have to withstand like massive cold or be strong enough to hunt large animals anymore.
mm,
That is a really interesting development. And but I also I had a really fun discussion with my niece around this years ago when she was not very old, where we talked about other human species living together, because of course she knew there were different species of monkeys, for example, so there could also have been different species of humans living together. And I remember I told her about the interbreeding between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, so modern humans. And she said, "Oh, so that would have been a mixed race child." And I say, "Yes,
mm.
in
Yes.
apart from the fact that race is not a biological term, it was a mixed species of."
Yeah, yeah.
But she actually highlighted an interesting point, because we sometimes use some very peculiar phrases when we talk about mixed race children, because obviously what we mean is a child that is parents of maybe different skin color usually. But the thing is, we are all Homo sapiens sapiens. We look differently. We have different skin color, hair color, eye color, sizes, but we are all one species. So calling us mixed anything is kind of a little rubbish, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, because you're right. It's down to melanin levels, isn't it? And
But sometimes, when you have those conversations with a child, you sort of go, actually, that's a good point.
yeah, yeah. Well, kids often cut straight to the nub of something, and they do make yeah. And in fact, actually, it's funny. They know they do it because I've heard children talking about, it's really weird. I just said something, and the grown-ups sort of went all really quiet and thoughtful,
Yeah,
and then
sort of,
wandered off.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when you get the question, why is it like that? And you have to revert to the good old, because it is. Let's talk about
Yes, because we simply don't know. Because see, with our, I mean, we're talking about our physiology as you've rightly done. We're much wimpier than the big burly Neanderthals in the film. But I wonder if there was a nutritional element to it, because we know now that in famine situations, it's weirdly, counterintuitively, it's the big muscly guys who die off first because they need more nutrition to maintain themselves, whereas the slightly readier folk can hang on longer because their bodies don't need the same level of sustenance. I suppose now that's modified by what your diet is anyway, so that it's a bit more complex than that. But
into a
I
good.
do wonder, in the context of ice ages and natural catastrophes, if maybe that might have sped along the demise of the bigger, beefier folk. And by sheer good luck, not only did our Homo sapiens intelligence help them stretch their food further and maybe try new food, but their physicality also equipped them better to survive longer.
You are onto a good point, because the smaller you are, the less food you need, obviously. So in times of food scarcity, it is easier to survive the smaller you are. You need less. So diet might well have had a huge impact on the development, or the extinction rather, on the Neanderthals. And maybe also in terms of what you could eat. Now, obviously, we don't know, but there might have been certain types of food that just didn't agree with the Neanderthals, maybe in the same way that it did with humans. So there might have been, if let's say we used to hunt a particular type of bird and that suddenly disappeared, we could maybe go and eat something else instead. Uh,
Yeah.
Generally speaking, humans nowadays, we are tolerant of quite a lot of different food. I mean, we can eat plant food, we can eat animals, we can eat lots of things that we grow. And a lot of animals are not necessarily, you can't feed everything to all types of animals. Obviously, you can't feed just anything to humans, but we are quite tolerant of a lot of different types of food.
Yes, we taught ourselves to cope with dairy, I gather, and
Yeah.
which must have been a bit painful for the first couple of generations until we got there, but but we got there.
There was a bit of, oh, need the toilet again going on.
Yeah, it's like, and I'm sure, surely at least one elder sitting in the group must have thought, holding his glass of milk or whatever it was back in the day, like, should we really keep persevering with this stuff?
Is it worth it, really?
Yeah, yeah. But
Um,
but there's a fascinating thought there too about first contact situations, because I remember on your other excellent channel, Heritage and Interpretation, you shared that brilliant documentary a while back about the Neanderthals and what we know about them. And
Yeah, that was a brilliant one. I think it's still on Netflix, guys. If you want to check it out, I think it's called the Secret Life of the Neanderthals or something.
that's the one. Thanks, Jane. I was struggling for the title, but I was intrigued by the bit near the end of that documentary where they talk about the decline of the Neanderthals, and they did this slightly dramatized first meeting between a sort of lone Neanderthal survivor and a new group of humans migrating in, and speculating about the nature of what these were like, because how I know we could never answer the question, but I do wonder how aware we were of how different the other was, and
And
how we reacted to that. Because
or maybe we weren't.
mm,
Maybe we weren't that aware of differences. But that documentary, as you mentioned, Andrew, also raises another interesting question, which is, could we communicate?
mm,
And if so, how did we? Now, again, it might not at all have been an issue. It might just have been that we could somehow. But there are so many unknowns around that. Did we fight each other, or were we sort of living in herds or families where we were mixed with Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, or how did that sort of, what sort of life did they lead individually? Was there a very different type of kind of lifestyle going on between these two? Were they hunting the same type of animals? Did they collaborate in that hunt? And what we do know that both species seem to have in common is a social caring for each other. So when you were not old enough to take care of yourself or too old, there was a caring. And we also know that in burial sites, there was the fact that you bury people you might have loved is an act of social love and connection, that you pass them on to the next life, or whatever you believed happened, you put them to rest. So that the fact that you go through the trouble of burying someone is a social caring trait that belong to humans especially, but also to some animals. And we know that both of them had that. So there might have been more collaboration than we know. But as you say, Andrew, there might also have been a division. We just don't know, but it is fascinating.
it's a very intriguing question. But yes, burials are a huge thing, aren't they? Because it represents such an evolutionary leap in how a group or a species thinks. And because I think it was in the documentary too, it hints at our level of imagination. We're clearly thinking about the afterlife. We're thinking about social constructs and social behaviors. And in a way, I suppose we're sort of codifying them through these acts of burial and remembrance, and the things we choose to paint on cave walls and stuff like that. It's
That's true. That's another fascinating element. Why did they depict what they did? Why these images of, it was often animals and hunting situations. So obviously we know that from lots of ancient religions there were, or cultures, there were an element of fertility going on, because that was important. You needed crops, you needed to breed, but there was clearly also a show of strength in a hunting situation that might have been important to somehow write down. Or
yeah. I did wonder actually if as well as being a beautiful work of art, things like the hunting scenes are also sort of teaching aids, because whatever scene you're showing, especially if you're teaching youngsters who are about to go out and do it for real with the grown-ups, this group will surround that mammoth, and then the other group will surround those mammoths. We're going to do it this way, and we're showing you this way because it's still a safe environment where you get the idea in your brains, and then we go out and
that is
and
true.
then we go and do the thing.
And
And
that's also what animals do nowadays. When you see like baby tigers play together or something, that's effectively rehearsal for hunting.
going on the hunt, yes, yeah. And I suppose from there it's just a short stop to, pictures of different kinds of crops. And, this is what should come out the ground when you drop these little seed things there and, water them constantly, talk to them.
Yes, true. And maybe it's more basic than we imagine, because I think one thing we might sometimes I won't say exaggerate, but maybe a mistake we sometimes do when we interpret historical research is that we overinterpret it. So we sometimes
Mm.
put meanings into something that might have been very basic indeed, because what we mustn't forget is that the main thing in this time and age was survival. So it was food, it was shelter, it was protection,
Yeah.
usually from your herd, your family, if you like. And sometimes I think we sometimes put a bit too much into some interpretations of archaeological or paleontologic research, because it was life was in a way very basic and very simple. You had to survive, and you lived, and you took care of your own, and you bred some new little offsprings, and you fed them until they could take care of themselves, and you taught them as well as you could, and then that was life.
Yes, and it must have been pretty exhausting. So you wouldn't really have time or inclination to, I don't know, sit on your porch of an evening and compose poetry or something like that. It's just
Be
more.
philosophical.
Yes, yeah, no, that everyone just tumbles into bed because it's going to be an equally rough day tomorrow. And,
Tomorrow we get up and we do it all again. Yes, yes. And I think sometimes we maybe forget that a little bit in our.
yes, because for all its craziness, the pace of modern life still does allow us quite a bit of time to sit around and think, which,
And also, we don't really have to survive until
yeah,
something happens to us, until maybe we get a diagnosis, we get ill, or we are in some form of life and death situation. Maybe we're in an accident or something. We don't really have
mm,
to relate to death on a daily basis until something happened to us. And that I think has changed our mindset quite a bit as well. Our daily life now is, luckily, we can say, not about surviving. It's much
yeah.
more about thriving, really.
Yes, we do. If I think about it and I think about my average week, a very high portion of it gets to be spent in enjoyment and I hope a bit of self-betterment, but I won't say anything about what the statistical balance, the percentage balance is, because that gives away enough already. But
But you're
um,
right. It's a good point. It's a good point. Anyway, are we being too deep? Are we going too deep now, Andrew? We're talking about an animation. Are we going too deep?
Well, some might say we're going too deep, but you know what? To me, it's the sign of a really great movie that you can craft something that's so simple and so straightforward that a bunch of young kids could sit there and enjoy the heck out of it.
Yeah.
Um, or it could lead a couple of grown-ups down such an interesting, path and a route of discussion. Maybe we are overanalyzing it a bit, but do you know what? It's good fun. It's a really interesting period because, like I say, I know nothing about what the world was up to at this point. And oh, I did mean to ask you at one point. They walk past what I'm sure is meant to be Stonehenge, and Sid makes a quip about how it'll never catch on or something like that. Now, is in terms of the timescales you were talking about right at the beginning, is that right for Stone? Do we know enough about Stonehenge to sort of get, or was the film just chucking something really recognizable and funny in there?
I think it was putting something very recognizable in there.
Okay.
Yes, which is good, because it does also give it a little bit of perspective in terms of something that's recognizable, because they are walking in a landscape that is for us very foreign in many
Yeah.
ways. So I actually think that is put in a little bit like the spaceship scene and that kind of
Yes.
scene. That's very well done, actually, but it's a nice little way of doing it. And again, it adds to Sid's character, I think,
Yeah.
that little modern architecture,
Uh,
kind of thing. No, it's a very good, but just also that actually leads me to what you mentioned before, Andrew, because I think the best movies over, not just animations, but movies, stories, books overall, are those that can be understood on on several levels. So you can have a kid enjoy this and just think it's very funny, and you can have an adult, starting to talk about the Pleistocene epoch or whatever, and I think those are the movies that are and the stories that are best researched and actually best put together.
Yeah, yeah.
Then
And
I
oh,
mean,
sorry.
I hate to be one of those who sit down and analyze and go, "Oh, the sloth didn't at all look like that," when we
Um,
said it. I hate when people do that, because that it's not the point. The point
yeah.
is to enjoy a good movie, or this so didn't happen during the Roman period. And yeah, we can talk about what happened then, but I think again, it's a story, and it's a good story, and it's entertaining, and it
Yes.
sparks interest in this period of time. Fantastic.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great gateway for young children and even for the odd adult who, knows nothing about the period to sort of get a merest glimpse and then think, oh yeah, actually, I'd like to. And to be fair to the creators, I gather they put in lots and lots of visits to the Museum of Natural
Yeah.
History in New York. So they took that side of it pretty seriously in terms of creature creation and
That must have been the hardest bit. I don't know, I'm guessing now, but what do they look like, and how do we, because they obviously have certain characteristics and personalities, and we need Jago to be such and such at the beginning and then mellow a little bit. And but one thing is figuring out what an animal looked like, but how do we, what personality does it have? That's really,
yeah.
because you can clearly see when you look at the saber-tooth pack, they're very different in character and personalities.
Yeah, you've got the slightly tubby, lazy one, haven't you? Who only gets a couple of lines in the film, but he's great because he's there. And you get the scrawny, twitchy one who's clearly got, attention span issues.
And you get that very cool leader and effectively evil leader of the pack, and even the mammoths too. They're very different. And these animals we see in the migration line at the beginning, when they're all sort of, yeah, they are, we all get a little glimpse into different personalities, funny and humorous as it might be, but that must be really difficult.
Yes, yeah, to dream them up too, because do you know the little ones that were playing in the mud and going help, help, help? For a second, I did actually. The first time I ever watched it, I thought, oh no, what's going to happen to them? And then their dad comes along and say, come on, stop playing Extinction. It's it's
Oh my.
yeah. I don't know, Jane, did you feel a bit of a twinge at the dodos bit? Because you kind of laugh at them, but at the same time you think, oh no, oh, so that's why you guys went down. Okay.
I actually think that was really sweet. And again, I think it's a brilliant route into discussing this with the kids.
Yeah.
Fantastic little, these existed kind of thing. Let's go to the National Museum and have a look,
Yeah, yeah.
In a
It's
way, it's a funny, funny, funny scene. And I think again, Sid there just stealing it all.
oh yes, yeah, as he does. They really got him right, I think. And
And
uh,
as you said, Andrew, he is the glue. He really holds everything together. You can't have an Ice Age. I mean, even in the sequels that came, I think, are we up to 5 now? Ice Age
oh
films?
yeah, there's been so many subsequent films and spin-offs. I mean, if a yardstick of success is needed, there it is.
But
It's
he's the one, isn't he? He's the one
yeah.
that holds it all together. But I also say, even in Scrat, that weird little thing that we don't even know what is, he has a great personality. You can just see that personality shining through. And I'm so
Yes.
impressed whenever animators manage to do that. That's
Yeah.
such a skill.
And he rightly has a cult following because he's got to be one of the most expressive animated creatures I've ever seen. And the fact that he has no recognizable dialogue other than it's it's just spectacular. It's such an achievement. And
And it's amazing you can feel for him because you don't know him. You've never heard him talk. You've no idea. And yet
yeah,
you know this little creature.
yes, the little furry thing that could. It's- Yeah,
But
Jane, I'm going to steal your thunder a tiny bit because you're always really good at picking up on this
sorry,
element
I'm just
of
chatting.
films. No, 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 this is brilliant, but it's just before I forgot all about it. The music music in this film is lovely, isn't it?
It is actually, you're right. You're right. I've completely forgot. It is actually, it's well done. Who wrote that, Andrew?
Well, I had to look it up because I had no idea. It's David Newman who, would you believe he's into what must, well, I don't know if he's still alive or not, but when this film was made, he had at least 3 decades of
Yeah.
composing music for Hollywood blockbusters and all kinds of films. And
Oh gosh, I didn't know that. Thanks for reminding me. I didn't know that. That
yeah.
is good. That is really good, actually. It's very, at times, very epic.
Yes, yeah, and for most of the film, and I think I mean this as a tribute to how good the score is. You kind of don't know it's there,
Mm.
but it's happily mood setting in the background. I only really notice the music during the epic bits, like you say, and also that very sad moment in the
Yeah,
cave where when Manny's thinking about his family. Then you suddenly think, oh, actually, I can hear this now, and then something exciting happens, and it
yeah.
sort of fades back a bit. But
Well, and I think also in movies where there is, or in scenes where there's little dialogue, the music do the talking.
yeah,
Which is kind of nice. We talked about the Last of the Mohicans before, with this last very epic scene where there's absolutely no dialogue at all. But also in this, I think it's it when Diego is badly wounded and we think he's going to die.
oh yes, that was another
There's,
moment
there's
where
fantastic musical interpretations in this one, actually. Well mentioned, Andrew. That's really good. I hadn't thought about that at all.
yeah, well, it only occurred to me when I was watching the last few minutes of the film and kind of like thinking it over and thought, actually, you know what, this does have. So I did go on to some kind. Actually, a lot of kind souls have shared the soundtrack on YouTube. So this morning I just put the soundtrack on while I was working and just had it playing while I was doing some work and just thought, do you know what, that actually is a really good soundtrack.
Yes. Oh no, is good. I don't even know if he's still alive, is he?
I have no idea. I haven't. Guys, if you happen to know whether David Newman is still kicking, I hope he is.
I hope he is.
Still
He
kicking and
might be.
writing music.
Some people should never die. No, but he's really, really good. He's really, really good. Oh, I didn't know it was him.
Yeah, I know it's very unobtrusive because it's not. I mean, there's a lot of recognizable names in this film, but it's not sort of blockbuster level
Yeah.
names. I mean, I knew Manny from Everyone Loves Raymond. I think it's that Raymond, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, but the other actors I didn't really know, or I've not watched the right films, or
There were a couple I recognized when I saw pictures of them, but I didn't know their names, I gotta confess.
I know a very, I don't know how early he was in his career then. What one of the saber-toothed tigers is voiced by Jack Black, but he only gets a
Yes.
couple of lines in it, so he
Is
didn't get a huge shout in this one.
I don't remember which one. Or is it the lead? I don't know. I don't remember. But he has a very, very good voice for
Yeah.
a few animations. He has a really good voice for it. He can do a lot with his voice. It has such
Yes, yeah. And that slightly gravelly tone, that sort of authority and menace at the same
yes.
time. And yeah.
He can go sort of all silly and high pitched and at the same time very deep and serious. He has a really good voice for animations. Yeah, no, I actually think they were cast really well. I mean, down to that, even again, a personality thing, that lisp that Sid has,
Yes.
to that silliness, a little bit. and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
down to Scratch and his
Yes. Yeah, not many people can pull that off. The only person I can think of who can put himself through a really impressive range of throaty noises without ripping out his voice box is possibly Andy Serkis when he was doing Gollum in the Lord of the
oh
Rings.
yes,
And he was always having to do
yes.
that.
I still cannot believe how he did that for so long. That must have just ruined his voice.
No, apparently it was quite a grueling filming schedule. And yeah, I don't know how he had a voice at all by the end of the day.
But also, once you get Gollum's voice, finessing it, you know.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
just insane how you can do that. There were some actors really are good voice actors, and it's kind of a skill in its own right to be able to do that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's the one thing Gollum and Sid have in common, which is that very complex range.
And there's a lot of personality in the voice as well. One thing is having the animation well done and the personality thing, and we talked about the eyes and all of that. But there is a lot of personality in the voice and the sound of the voice and the lisp and the or the deepness or whatever it is of the voice, that or even the accent, you know.
Yeah,
That especially when you're trying to portray animals, because we have a certain idea about what certain animals are like. Sometimes we are influenced by literature, like for example, owls have a tendency of being very clever because they sort of look like they wear glasses, you know.
yeah.
And there's certain animals we put certain human traits into, um for good and bad, but you know, it the voice is just a very important part of that personality that has to shine through.
Yes, yes. And if you do it as a purely technical exercise, I think people can tell if
Yeah,
it's not sort of married up with the emotion and the personality. Yeah.
true. That's true. I wonder how much the actors, they must look at the animations quite a bit in that development of the voice.
Yeah.
What do we want him? Is he just silly, or is he slightly silly? And you know, what do we do with that? But it must be quite a bit of a journey. It must be very different from acting on the screen.
Yes, I imagine it in some ways a lot trickier because I imagine it would be hard enough trying to match your voice to an animated human character. Um, to do it to an animal, and of course their mouths are really not that expressive at all. And I mean, poor Manny is always talking behind his trunk anyway, so it's kind of
Also kind of robbed a little bit from using some of your tools as an actor, because a lot of what you do is in your expression, uh,
yeah.
and in your body language, obviously. So you're kind of robbed a bit from using some of your usual tools when you do voiceovers. But it must be a really interesting part of the job.
Yes, yeah, and I get the impression they all welcomed the challenge of doing this. They did it, as you said, they did it superbly. I can't imagine a better cast for this particular film. Yeah, and they were there's something I can't put my finger on it, but the big three, Manny, Sid, and Diego, there's something about that group of voices
Yeah.
that just sits very naturally together. It's meant to be.
Yeah, they do. They do bounce off each other really well, in animations, in the drawings, as well as in the voices. And there is, I think that's very much part of the dynamic between the three of them as well. Because they do go from enemies to not liking each other to all of them being in a bit of a crisis, because they've all of them been left in a way. So they are outcasts, and then they find out, okay, we don't really have anybody else but each other. So we have to sort of make this work with our very different agendas, but still.
Yeah, and then by the end, actually, we've got quite a lot in common. So yeah,
Oh, a lovely film. A lovely. Have we forgotten anything, Andrew, or is it time to hand over?
it's probably time to hand over. I was just wondering because you see, the beauty of it is it sent us on such an engaging discussion. I've really enjoyed today. Thanks, Jane. But it's such a simple film at the same time that actually you can pick interesting bits off it, look at them, put them back, and still get through it in a reasonable amount of time. So no, I can't think of anything unless you can. Guys, have we missed stuff? You know what to do. And we'll thank and acknowledge as soon as we can. And yeah, please do have your say. As always, you've listened to us, so we'd love to hear.
Maybe we have overanalyzed. So bring us back to the real world, guys.
Yeah, yeah. There's nothing wrong with saying, "Oh, stop it, you two. Just enjoy the film."
Come back and just enjoy the film, okay?
Yes, watch all the other ones because I have to
Yes.
confess I haven't watched. I think I watched the second film and I haven't watched any of them since.
I think I have watched the first three. I think
Okay.
the third one happened to be on around Christmas time. And so I sat down and enjoyed that one. But I think there is are there 4 or 5?
Yeah, and there's a lot of little spin-offs as well. There's there's like the odd Christmas special here, and there's a couple of others floating out there. So yes, it's
We
not
do
quite
get
caught up with the
introduced.
Fast and Furious franchise, but
Yes, but we introduced to some other really great characters as well in some of the later films, and Manny, of course, getting his family and so on. So yeah, all good. But let us know, guys, what you think. And did you have a favorite Ice Age movie? And what have we missed? And all of that. Please comment.
yeah, your favorite character in Ice Age and why? Because I'd be interested to know. I really like Manny. I just
Yeah,
love the way he is. I like his sort of low-level sarcasm, and but I like his sort of very caring, soft side underneath that grumpy
yeah.
exterior. But yeah, favorite character, Jane? Do you have one in this film?
Oh, it's so hard because they all belong together, don't they? I
Yeah,
kind of did. Yeah, no, I love the three of them. They are a wonderful trio together. And I think just when you're about to get a little annoyed with Sid, and Manny sort of pulls him back down, okay, just stop it and carry on. But I also love the way they had done the child, because that's not easy either to do. One
uh,
thing is to do a child, but also to actually give it a personality and a role in the film, because it was easy to just make it this bundle that they carry with them, but it
yeah,
does impact the story and the events that happens from time to time when it's crying or laughing or whatever. And it also is, as children do, they have that ability to sometimes just reach out and touch you at very
Hmm.
important moments. And I love that it was we don't know if it's a boy or girl, do we?
They never quite specify, no, so I'm going to revert to it. I kind of always assumed it was a boy, but that's a bit
Yes, I did so too, for whatever reason. A child. I love that, sometimes she just reaches up and it just needs Manny and sort of just embraces the trunk and that kind of thing. And even
Yeah,
when he's sort of learning to walk and stumble towards Diego, you can't not, feel a
very
little,
heartbreaking. It's in a good way. It's very heartwarming, I should
and
say.
he's pushing it away and go, yeah, yeah, off you go again. Off you go again.
The parting is very moving when
Yes, yes. And
yeah,
That's
I,
lovely. That is lovely. I actually think they did the child really well, but the dynamic between the three of them, there's just no topping it. It's just great.
no, I think you're absolutely right there. But oh, well, thank you, Jane. I should say, guys, Jane suggested this one, and I'm so glad you did. It's been absolutely excellent.
I think we had two criteria. One, we need to get out of the 90s.
Yes, yeah,
And
and
two,
two,
we just do something that's a little unusual.
yes, yeah, and I think this one tops the unusual and a little bit different list. But do you know what? It's been a wonderful breath of fresh air, and yeah, I'm so glad we visited this one. And also, it does open the door because there's quite a few other animated adventures out there that are set in the past or a past that would be well worth visiting in the future. So thanks, Jane, for sort of opening up that vista for.
Thanks for indulging me, Andrew. It's wonderful as always to do these with you.
Oh, likewise, likewise.
And to you guys. So please join in.
Yes, we look forward to hearing from you, and we look forward to seeing you again in the next one. But a very warm goodbye and thank you from us for now. And I look forward to seeing you again very soon, Jane.
And you, Andrew, take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.